Welcome back, everyone, to a new story. We really hope you enjoy it. The first thing I remember is the smell, not the metallic tang of blood or the acrid smoke of burnt rubber, though I'm sure those were there. No, the first smell that cut through the fog in my head was the sterile, unforgiving scent of antiseptic. It's the smell of surrender, the smell of a body that has failed you and been handed over to others to fix. I opened my eyes. The world was a blurry, painful white, a ceiling, I guessed. Fluorescent lights hummed a monotonous tune somewhere above, a sound that drilled directly into the base of my skull. A machine beeped a steady, rhythmic pulse beside me, the only proof that I was still part of the living world. I tried to sit up. A mistake. A lance of pure agony shot through my ribs, and I fell back against the starchy pillow with a groan that felt like it was scraped from the bottom of my lungs. Easy there. Mr. Miller. A calm, professional voice. A nurse, a woman in her late 30s with kind but weary eyes, adjusted my IV drip. You took quite a tumble. A few broken ribs. A concussion. You're lucky to be in one piece. Lucky. The word echoed in the cavernous space of my mind. I was 50 years old. 50. An age that sounds solid and respectable when you're 20, but feels like a slow, crumbling decay when you're actually living it. My construction business had gone under 2 years ago. My wife had left me for a yoga instructor named Zen a year after that, and my savings were a cruel joke. The accident some kid in a pickup truck running a red light felt less like a tragedy and more like a logical conclusion, the final pathetic punctuation mark on the long, rambling sentence of my failure. I was a broken man, in every sense of the word. My body ached. My spirit was hollowed out, and my future was a gray, featureless landscape. I spent the next 2 days drifting in and out of a morphine haze, listening to the monotonous beeps and hums of the hospital, feeling the slow, tedious creep of time. My life hadn't just stalled, it had gone into reverse, and the brakes were shot. On the third day, he appeared. He wasn't a doctor I'd seen before. He was younger, maybe early 40s, with sharp, well-tailored clothes that seemed out of place among the scrubs and lab coats. He had dark, intelligent eyes and a smile that didn't quite reach them. It was a salesman's smile, a smile that promised you something you didn't know you wanted. "Mr. Jamie Miller," he asked, his voice smooth as polished marble. He held a sleek tablet in his hands, not a clumsy hospital chart. I grunted an affirmation, my throat still raw. "I'm Dr. Richard Sterling," he said, pulling up a chair. He didn't ask how I was feeling, he seemed to know already. "I'm with a private research division affiliated with this hospital. I've been reviewing your case. Medically, you're stable. You'll heal. But I get the sense that the physical injuries aren't your primary concern." His directness was unnerving. I just stared at him, my silence a brittle wall. He leaned forward, lowering his voice into a conspiratorial tone. "Mr. Miller, what if I told you there was a way to reset, a chance to feel something different, something new, even if just for a short time, a chance to step outside of this life, this body, and see the world from a completely different perspective?" I must have looked at him like he was crazy. "What are you talking about? Some kind of virtual reality gimmick?" He chuckled, a dry, crisp sound. "Oh, it's far more immersive than that. My division is working on a new form of neural physical transference technology. It's experimental. We need willing participants for short-term trials. 24 hours. To be exact." I snorted, the effort sending another jolt of pain through my ribs. "You want to use a crash victim as your lab rat? No thanks." "Hear me out," he said, his eyes gleaming with that strange intensity. "The procedure is completely safe. It's temporary, and there's compensation involved, a significant amount." He paused, letting the words hang in the air like bait. $7,500 for 24 hours of your time. $7,500. The number hit me like a physical blow. It was more money than I had to my name. It could pay my overdue rent, fix my wrecked car, maybe even give me a tiny sliver of breathing room. My mind, which had been a muddy swamp of self-pity, suddenly sharpened. Desperation is a powerful motivator. "What's the catch?" I asked, my voice raspy. "What's this transference?" Dr. Sterling's smile widened, but it still held that unnerving, Clinical edge. The technology allows for a temporary consciousness swap between two willing participants. We have another volunteer, a young woman who has also agreed to the terms. For 24 hours, you would experience life in her body and she in yours. The room seemed to tilt. Was this guy for real swap bodies? It sounded like the plot of a bad comedy from the 80s. You're telling me I'd be a woman. The words felt absurd on my tongue. For one day. Yes, he confirmed, his expression unreadable. Think of it. Mr. Miller, an opportunity to escape, to feel young and healthy again, to be completely anonymous, and to be well paid for the experience. All you have to do is sign a few forms, and we can begin the procedure as soon as you're ready. He placed the tablet on my lap. A digital contract glowed on the screen, full of dense legal jargon that I couldn't begin to decipher. My eyes kept snagging on the number $7,500. I looked around the sterile white room, at the IV drip feeding me nutrients because I couldn't be bothered to eat, at the bandages wrapped tightly around my aching chest. I thought of my empty apartment, the stack of unpaid bills on the counter, the face in the mirror that looked older and more defeated every single day. What did I have to lose? My dignity. I'd lost that a long time ago. My identity that felt like a lead weight I'd been dragging around for years. For 24 hours, I could be someone else, anyone else, and I'd get paid for it. The fear was there, a cold knot in my stomach, but beneath it, something else flickered, a tiny, dangerous spark of curiosity. What would it be like to be young again, to be her? Okay, I whispered, the sound barely audible. I'll do it. Dr. Sterling's smile finally seemed genuine. An excellent decision. Mr. Miller, you won't regret it. I had a feeling that was a lie, but as I scrawled my shaky signature on the glowing screen, I found that I didn't care. An hour later, they moved me, not to a regular room, but down to a sub-level of the hospital I never knew existed. The antiseptic smell was replaced by the clean, cool scent of ozone and the low hum of powerful machinery. The corridors were sleek and metallic, lit by recessed blue lights that made the whole place feel like the inside of a supercomputer. They led me into a room that was less a hospital room and more a minimalist laboratory. In the center was a single reclining chair, a medical-grade version of something you'd see in a first-class airline cabin. Dr. Sterling was there, along with a woman in a lab coat who he introduced as Dr. Linda Harris. She had a calm, reassuring demeanor that did little to soothe the frantic hummingbird trapped in my chest. The procedure is painless. Jamie, Dr. Harris said, her voice soft, you'll simply feel a bit drowsy, and then you'll fall asleep. When you wake up, the transfer will be complete. I sat in the chair, the cool leather sticking to the thin fabric of my hospital gown. My heart was pounding a frantic rhythm against my bruised ribs. This was insane. I was a 50-year-old man about to let a stranger put my mind into a young woman's body for cash. It was the most desperate, ludicrous decision of my entire life. Dr. Sterling approached holding a device. It was a mask, but not like any I'd ever seen. It was made of a smooth, white, semi-flexible material molded to the contours of a human face but devoid of features. A network of fine, silvery wires spread from the back of it, connecting to a console beside the chair. This is the neural interface, he explained, his voice businesslike. It will map your neural pathways and facilitate the temporary transfer. Just relax and breathe normally. He placed the mask over my face. It was cool to the touch. As it settled into place, it seemed to create a perfect seal, blocking out all light and sound from the outside world. I was alone in the dark, with nothing but the sound of my own ragged breathing and the frantic beat of my heart. A moment later, a low hum started, vibrating through the bones of my skull. It grew steadily in pitch and intensity. I felt a strange pressure building behind my eyes, a tingling sensation that spread down my spine. It felt invasive. It felt like my very soul was being scanned, cataloged, and digitized. My heart hammered. A wild, panicked drum solo. My ears began to ring, the hum escalating into a piercing whine. The darkness behind my eyes started to flicker with pinpricks of colored light, like a starfield rushing past me at impossible speeds. The feeling of being in the chair, of being in my own body, began to dissolve. It was like being pulled through a straw, my consciousness stretching and thinning until it was just a single thread of awareness rocketing through an abyss. I tried to scream, but I had no mouth. I tried to struggle, but I had no limbs. And then, just as the pressure became unbearable, everything went silent, the light, the sound, the sensation, it all vanished. There was nothing, just a deep, peaceful, dreamless void. I don't know how long I was in that void. It could have been a second or a century, but then, slowly, sensation began to return. First came the feeling of soft cotton against my skin, then the gentle weight of a blanket. I could hear a familiar, rhythmic beeping, but it sounded different, clearer, sharper. I opened my eyes. I was in another hospital room. This one was brighter, with warm sunlight streaming through a large window. I was lying in a bed, covered by a light sheet. Dr. Linda Harris stood beside me, a clipboard in her hand, smiling down at me. "Welcome back," she said gently. "How do you feel?" I tried to answer, to say fine, but the sound that came out of my mouth was not my own. It was a soft, melodic, slightly breathy voice, a voice that was at least 2 octaves higher than my gravelly baritone. "What?" I whispered, and the sound was so alien, so foreign, that it sent a jolt of pure panic through me. I instinctively brought a hand to my throat, and my heart stopped. The hand was not mine. It was slender, with long, delicate fingers and perfectly shaped nails painted a pale, shimmering pink. I stared at it, turning it over and over. The skin was smooth, unblemished, the wrists thin and graceful. There were no calluses from years of hard labor, no sunspots, no thickened knuckles. It was the hand of a stranger. "What's happening?" I asked again, and this time I heard the pure terror in that strange feminine voice. "It's all right, Jamie," Dr. Harris said, her voice a steady anchor in my swirling vortex of confusion. "The transfer was successful. You're in Amelia's body now, just as we discussed." The words hit me, but my brain refused to process them. I threw back the sheet, my movements clumsy and uncoordinated. I looked down, and I screamed. It was a high, piercing shriek that I didn't recognize as my own. Beneath the thin hospital gown, I saw a body that was utterly, completely, terrifyingly alien, where my broad, hairy chest and slightly paunchy stomach should have been. There were 2 soft, round mounds of flesh pressing against the fabric. My gaze darted lower, seeing slender, toned legs, smooth and hairless, ending in small, narrow feet. This wasn't me. This couldn't be me. With a surge of adrenaline, I scrambled out of the bed, my legs tangling in the sheets. I was unsteady, my center of gravity all wrong. I stumbled towards the bathroom, my bare feet cold on the tiled floor. My reflection in the mirror was the final, devastating blow. Staring back at me was not the tired, 50-year-old face of Jamie Miller. It was the face of a girl, a young woman, maybe 22 at most, with wide, terrified blue eyes, my eyes, somehow trapped in her face. She had a heart-shaped face, a small straight nose, and full, pink lips that were parted in a silent gasp. A cascade of long, honey-blonde hair fell around her shoulders. I reached up, my new slender fingers trembling, and touched the smooth cheek of the girl in the mirror. In the reflection, her hand rose to touch her face, my face. A wave of vertigo washed over me. I felt her knees buckle. Dr. Harris was there in an instant, a steadying arm around my new narrow waist. "Easy," she said. "It's a lot to take in. Just breathe." I leaned against the wall, my heart this new, faster beating heart thudding against a ribcage that felt impossibly delicate. I stared at the reflection, at the stranger wearing my consciousness. I touched my face, my long hair, the soft curve of my jaw. The skin was like silk. The hands were elegant. The body was a masterpiece of youth and vitality. And it was mine. For the next 24 hours. It was mine. The terror was still there. A cold, hard stone in my stomach. But as I stared into those panicked blue eyes, another feeling began to surface. Something insidious and unwelcome. A flicker of awe. Dr. Harris guided me back to the bed, her touch both professional and strangely comforting. I sat on the edge of the mattress, my hands clasped in my lap, Amelia's hands. I corrected myself and tried to wrap my head around the impossible reality. "I know this is disorienting," she said, pulling a small hand mirror from a drawer. "Take your time, get acquainted." She handed it to me. I held it with trembling fingers. Up close, the details were even more overwhelming. I saw the fine blonde hairs of her eyebrows, the impossibly long, dark lashes framing those blue eyes. I opened my mouth, and the lips in the mirror parted, revealing small, white, perfect teeth. I ran my tongue over them. They felt alien, too smooth. I spoke my name, Jamie. The sound that came out was a soft, musical whisper. It was Amelia's voice, but it was my thought, my intent. The disconnect was nauseating. I felt like a ghost piloting a stranger's body. My fingers went to my hair, sinking into the thick, silky mass. It smelled faintly of coconuts and vanilla. My own hair had been thinning and gray for years. This felt like a gift from another world. I touched the delicate shell of my ear, the smooth column of my neck. Every sensation was new, heightened. The skin was so sensitive, so responsive. Then, my hands drifted lower, hesitantly, to the front of the hospital gown. My fingers brushed against the soft mounds of my new chest. A jolt, like a mild electric shock, went through me. They were real. They were soft and warm and undeniably a part of this body. Under the thin cotton, I could feel the hard nub of a nipple, and a wave of heat washed over my face. I snatched my hand away as if I'd been burned. This was too much. It was too intimate, too real. One part of my brain, the logical, 50-year-old part, was screaming in protest, horrified by this grotesque violation, but another, quieter part, a part I didn't want to acknowledge, was utterly fascinated. I had spent my life in a body that was functional, a tool for work and existence. This body felt decorative. It was an object of art, and I was suddenly living inside it. The fear was warring with a deep, primal curiosity. It was a terrifying, exhilarating conflict. "Amelia's personal effects are here," Dr. Harris said, gesturing to a small locker. "She was told to pack for a one-night stay. We find it helps with the acclimatization process if you wear something more normal." She opened the locker and pulled out a small duffel bag. Inside was a neatly folded set of clothes. She laid them out on the bed, a simple white t-shirt, a pair of light-wash denim shorts, and a set of underwear. My eyes fixated on the bra. It was a lacy, pale blue thing, all delicate straps and intricate stitching. It looked like a puzzle, an impossibly fragile piece of engineering. "You should get dressed," she said, her tone gentle but firm. "I'll step out to give you some privacy." She left, and the door clicked shut behind her. I was alone with the stranger in the mirror and her clothes. For a long moment, I just sat there, staring at the pile of fabric. This was the next step, the first real act of inhabiting this life. Slowly, I stood up and slipped off the hospital gown, letting it fall to the floor. I turned to the full-length mirror on the back of the door and froze. The full sight of Amelia's body, naked and vulnerable, was breathtaking. She was perfectly proportioned, with a narrow waist that flared into gentle, curved hips. Her stomach was flat, her legs long and toned. The sheer, unadulterated youth of it all was what struck me the most. There were no scars, no stretch marks, no signs of wear and tear. It was a brand new machine. I picked up the pale blue panties. The fabric was silky, impossibly light. Stepping into them felt strange, the material hugging my new hips. Then came the bra. I looked at it, then at my reflection, completely lost. I held it up to my chest, trying to figure out how it worked. After a minute of fumbling, I realized the clasp was in the back. Turning it around, I managed to hook the tiny metal clasps together, my fingers feeling thick and clumsy. Then I spun it around and tried to maneuver my arms through the straps. It was a clumsy, awkward dance. Finally, it was on. The sensation was utterly alien. The underwire pressed firmly against my ribs, lifting and supporting the weight of my new breasts. The straps dug slightly into my shoulders. It was confining, restrictive, and yet it also felt oddly secure. It defined my new shape, making it feel more real, more permanent. Next, the t-shirt. It was soft, probably a cotton blend. As I pulled it over my head, it clung to my new torso, outlining the shape of the bra and the curve of my breasts. I looked in the mirror. The simple white shirt looked completely different on this body than it ever would have on mine. It was feminine. Finally, the denim shorts. They were short, ending high on my thighs, zipping them up. I felt the rough fabric against my smooth skin. They were snug, hugging my hips and backside. I felt exposed, vulnerable. Dr. Harris had left a pair of simple white sneakers on the floor. I sat down to put them on. They were tiny, at least 4 sizes smaller than my old shoes. As I stood up, my balance felt off. I took a few tentative steps. My gait was different. I felt a subtle, natural sway in my hips that wasn't there before. Every movement was a discovery. The way my thighs brushed together, the way the soft weight on my chest shifted with each step. A knock on the door made me jump. "Are you decent?" Dr. Harris called. "Yes," I managed to say, the voice still a shock. She came in and gave me an appraising look. "Good, that's much better. Now, a few things you need to know. The transfer is stable for exactly 24 hours. At that point, the process will automatically reverse. You will wake up back in your own body. Amelia is currently in your old room, being monitored. She is aware of the terms, just as you are. The most important rule is to remain within this wing of the hospital. We need to monitor your vitals." 24 hours. The clock was ticking. A part of me was relieved, counting the minutes until I could return to the familiar prison of my own skin. But another part felt a strange pang of disappointment. Only 24 hours to be this person, to feel this alive. "What do I do now?" I asked. "Whatever you like," she said with a shrug. "Read a magazine, watch TV, walk around the lounge, experience it. That's the point of the study. After all." She left me alone again. I walked over to the window and looked out. The world outside looked the same, but I was seeing it through different eyes. I felt a profound sense of detachment, as if I were watching a movie about someone else's life. But when I caught my reflection in the window glass, the girl with the blonde hair and the worried expression, I knew this wasn't a movie. This was my reality. For one day, I wasn't Jamie Miller, the failed contractor. I was Amelia, and I had no idea who she was. The first few hours were a study in awkwardness. I tried to walk normally, but my body insisted on moving with a grace I didn't possess. I felt like a puppeteer struggling with a new, exquisitely made marionette. I kept bumping into things, misjudging the space my new, more slender frame occupied. I ventured out of the room and into the designated lounge area. It was a quiet, comfortable space with plush sofas and a large television. A few other people in hospital-issued pajamas were milling about, though they had a similar dazed, disconnected look in their eyes. Other participants, I guessed. No one made eye contact. We were all lost in our own surreal experiences. I picked up a fashion magazine from a coffee table, my fingers tracing the glossy image of a model on the cover. I tried to read an article, but the words swam before my eyes. My attention was entirely consumed by the physical sensations of my new reality. The feeling of the soft sofa cushion against the back of my thighs, the way my long hair tickled my neck when I turned my head, the subtle, constant pressure of the bra against my ribs. I was acutely aware of my own body in a way I had never been before. As a man, my body was a utility. It got me from point A to point B. It lifted heavy things. It got sick. It got tired. It got old. But it was just a vehicle. This body was an experience. Every nerve ending seemed to be buzzing with new information. I got up to get a glass of water from a cooler in the corner. As I was filling a paper cup, a young male nurse, probably in his mid-20s, walked past. He was heading to another room, but he paused and gave me a brief, friendly smile. "Everything okay, Miss Amelia?" he asked, his eyes crinkling at the corners. The words hit me with the force of a physical impact. Miss Amelia. He saw the girl. He saw the pretty face, the blonde hair, the female form. He didn't see the tired, 50-year-old man cowering inside. A hot blush spread up my neck and across my cheeks. I felt my heart flutter in a way that was completely foreign to me. I'm fine, thank you," I stammered, my voice coming out as a breathless squeak. He nodded and continued on his way, probably forgetting the interaction instantly. But for me, it was a seismic event, that simple. Polite acknowledgement had triggered something deep inside me. It was a cocktail of emotions I couldn't untangle: shame, embarrassment, fear of being discovered, and a tiny, thrilling spark of validation, a flicker of feminine pride. The feeling was disgusting. It was intoxicating. I took the water back to the couch, my hands shaking slightly. I sat there for a long time, replaying the moment in my head. He had looked at me, and for a split second, I had felt seen, not as Jamie, the failure, but as Amelia, a young, attractive woman, and the attention, however brief and professional, felt good. It felt like a strange kind of power I'd never known. This was dangerous. My mind started to draw comparisons, a cruel and constant ledger. On one side was Jamie aching joints, a bad back, thinning hair, a face etched with worry and disappointment, a body that felt like a liability, a constant reminder of time's relentless march. On the other side was Amelia, boundless energy, smooth skin, a body that moved with an effortless grace, a body that drew a pleasant smile from a handsome stranger, a body that felt like a promise, an unopened gift. The thoughts were seductive. What if this wasn't temporary? What if this could be my life? I pushed the thought away, horrified. This was a scientific experiment, a transaction. I had sold 24 hours of my life for a paycheck in less than a day. I would be back in my own skin, and this would all be a bizarre, feverish memory. Amelia would have her life back, and I would have my money. That was the deal. But as the afternoon wore on, the lines began to blur. I started to get used to the movements. I learned how to sit without feeling awkward, how to walk without looking like I was on stilts. I spent a good 30 minutes in front of the mirror in my room, just watching. I smiled, and Amelia's face lit up. I frowned, and her brow furrowed in a delicate, fetching way. I brushed her long, blonde hair, the simple, repetitive motion strangely soothing. I found myself feeling a bizarre sense of possessiveness, a wave of jealousy, even. Not towards Amelia herself, I didn't even know her, but towards what she had, this youth, this beauty, this potential. She was at the beginning of her story, while mine felt like it was already in its dreary final chapter. The temptation grew stronger, a whisper in the back of my mind. It wasn't just about escaping my old life anymore, it was about stealing a new one. The idea was monstrous, a violation of every moral principle I had, but it was also the most alluring thought I had entertained in decades. I looked at the clock on the wall. 12 hours had passed, 12 hours left. The thought of returning to my old body, to the pain and the weariness, filled me with a sense of dread that was far more profound than the initial shock of the transformation. I had been given a taste of paradise, and I was beginning to realize that I would do anything, absolutely anything, not to be cast out again. The broken man was dying, and a dangerous, beautiful stranger was being born in his place. The decision solidified around midnight. The hospital wing was quiet. The only sounds the soft hum of the ventilation and the distant, rhythmic beeps from monitors. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. Going back was not an option. The thought was both terrifying and liberating. It was a declaration of war against my own life, against the deal I had made. Dr. Sterling, Dr. Harris, Amelia, they would all be consequences I'd have to face later. But the immediate, overwhelming priority was to not let this body slip through my fingers. Adrenaline, cold and sharp, flooded my system. I had to get out of here. Before the 24 hours were up, before the technology automatically reversed itself, I didn't know if escaping would stop the process, but it was the only chance I had. I slid out of bed, my movements now surprisingly quiet and sure-footed. I was a thief in the night, and the thing I was about to steal was a person's life. I went to the duffel bag again, rummaging through Amelia's things. Tucked at the bottom was another outfit, presumably what she planned to wear when she left. It was far more daring than the shorts and t-shirt. There was a black, ribbed crop top, a short, dark red pleated skirt, and a black faux leather jacket. My heart hammered against my ribs as I began to change. This was different from the first time. This wasn't a curious exploration. It was a deliberate act of claiming an identity. I unhooked the blue bra and slipped it off, my skin momentarily free before I reached for the black one that went with the new outfit. This one was simpler. A soft wireless bralette. It was less restrictive, more comfortable. As I pulled the crop top over my head, the soft fabric stretched over my chest and left a strip of my flat, smooth stomach exposed. I felt a nervous flutter. I, Jamie Miller, who hadn't gone without a shirt in public in 20 years, was about to walk out into the world like this. Next, the skirt. I pulled it on, the material light and swishy. It barely reached mid-thigh, revealing an expansive leg that felt scandalously long. The fabric rustled as I moved. A soft, feminine sound. I looked in the mirror. The girl staring back was a stranger, but a confident one. The dark colors made her blue eyes pop, and the outfit highlighted the slimness of her waist and the length of her legs. She looked like someone who was going somewhere exciting, not a 50-year-old man having a panic attack. The jacket was the final piece of the puzzle. It felt cool and smooth. I zipped it up halfway, the metallic sound echoing in the silent room. I ran my hands through my hair, trying to tame it, and then slipped back into the white sneakers. It wasn't a perfect look sneakers with a skirt, but it was all I had. In the duffel bag, I found Amelia's wallet. I opened it, my hands shaking. Her driver's license stared up at me. Amelia Rosewood, 22 years old. A beautiful, smiling picture. There was about $200 in cash and a few credit cards. I took the cash and the ID, stuffing them into the jacket pocket. A profound sense of guilt washed over me, but I crushed it down. This was about survival. Now to get out. I peeked out of my room. The corridor was empty. The nurse's station at the far end was lit, but the nurse on duty was absorbed in her computer screen. The exit signs pointed the other way, towards a service corridor. It was a risk, but it was better than walking right past the staff. Moving on the balls of my feet, I slipped down the hallway, my sneakers making no sound on the polished linoleum. Every shadow seemed to stretch and twist. Every distant noise a sign of discovery. My new heart was a frantic drum against my ribs. The cool air of the hospital raised goosebumps on my bare stomach. I found the service door and pushed it open. It led to a steep flight of concrete stairs. I took them 2 at a time, my body light and agile in a way that still felt miraculous. Down, 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 until I reached a heavy metal door with a push bar. It was an emergency exit. An alarm would probably go off. I didn't hesitate. I shoved the bar with all my weight. A deafening alarm blared to life behind me, but I was already out, stumbling into the cool, damp night air of a deserted alleyway behind the hospital. Freedom. I didn't look back. I ran. I ran down the alley, the short skirt flying up around my thighs, my long hair whipping behind me. The city sounds were a shock after the silence of the hospital, the rumble of distant traffic, the wail of a siren. I emerged onto a side street and slowed to a fast walk, trying to look casual, trying to look like a girl who belonged on a city street at 1 a.m. A taxi came cruising down the street, its for-hire light a beacon of hope. I stuck out my arm, a gesture I'd made 1,000 times but which felt completely new with this slender, delicate limb. The taxi pulled over. The driver, a middle-aged man with a weary face, unlocked the back door. I slid in, the leather of the seat cool against my bare legs. "Where to, miss?" he asked, looking at me in the rearview mirror. His gaze lingered for a second longer than necessary, taking in my appearance. For a moment, I saw myself through his eyes, a young girl, dressed for a night out, alone at a strange hour. There was no judgment, just a tired curiosity. He didn't see a monster or a thief. He just saw a girl. And in that moment, something inside me clicked into place. The shame and the fear receded, replaced by a dizzying sense of power. This was it. This was my new reality. The reflection in the rearview mirror. The casual miss, it was all the confirmation I needed. "Just drive," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "Head towards the interstate. I'll tell you where to go from there." He nodded and pulled away from the curb, the hospital disappearing behind us. I leaned my head against the cool glass of the window, watching the city lights blur into streaks of color. Jamie Miller had entered that hospital a broken man. Amelia Rosewood was leaving it, a fugitive with a stolen body and a future that was a terrifying, exhilarating blank page. And for the first time in a very long time, I felt a tremor of something that felt dangerously like hope. I had the taxi driver drop me at a bus station on the edge of the city. I paid him with Amelia's cash, my hands still not quite used to the feel of handing over money with these slender fingers. He didn't give me a second glance. I was just another fare, another face in the night. The anonymity was a shield. I didn't stay at the bus station. It was too public, too many cameras. Instead, I walked a few blocks to a cheap, run-down motel, the kind with a flickering neon sign and rooms that rented by the hour. The night clerk was a sleepy teenager who barely looked up from his phone as I paid for a room. Again in cash. He slid a keycard across the counter. Room 107. The room was small and smelled of stale cigarette smoke and bleach, but it had a lock on the door and a bed. It was a sanctuary. As soon as the door was locked and bolted, I leaned against it, my legs weak with relief and adrenaline. I had done it. I was out. I was free. The first thing I did was walk into the small, grimy bathroom and stare at my reflection in the cracked mirror. The harsh fluorescent light was unflattering, but it was undeniably her. Amelia. My face. Slowly, as if in a trance, I began to undress. I peeled off the leather jacket, letting it drop to the floor, then the crop top. Finally, I unhooked the bralette and let it fall. I stood there, bare-chested, looking at the body that was now mine. This was different from the clinical environment of the hospital. This was real. This was my life now. I reached out and traced the curve of my collarbone, the slope of my shoulder. I cupped a breast in my hand, feeling its soft weight, the incredible sensitivity of the skin. A shiver ran through me, a complex mixture of wonder and a deep, unsettling sense of trespass. I slid the skirt and panties down my legs and kicked them aside. I stood completely naked in front of the mirror, taking in every detail, the narrow waist, the gentle flare of my hips, the smooth, pale skin of my thighs. I turned, looking over my shoulder at my new reflection. It was a body built for grace and beauty, not for hauling lumber and mixing concrete. A laugh escaped my lips. It was a strange sound, high and breathless. "This is insane," I whispered to the girl in the mirror. She didn't answer. She just stared back with my terrified, exhilarated eyes. My old life was gone. Jamie Miller was, for all intents and purposes, a missing person, a man who checked into a hospital and vanished. Or worse, a man whose mind was now trapped in a comatose state inside his own body while a young woman's consciousness piloted it. I tried not to think about that. I couldn't afford to. I had to plan. The $200 wouldn't last long. My first priority was money. All my life savings, the meager amount I had left, was tied to Jamie Miller's bank account, an account I could no longer access. Or could I? I found Amelia's phone in her jacket pocket. It was password protected with a fingerprint scanner. My heart sank, but then, with a hesitant breath, I pressed my new index finger, Amelia's finger, to the sensor. His finger too. It unlocked. A gasp escaped my lips. Of course, it was her body, her fingerprints. I had access to her entire digital life. I felt a fresh wave of guilt, but I pushed it down. I scrolled through her apps, social media, photos, and a banking app. I opened the banking app, my heart pounding. She had a checking account with a little over $1,000 in it. Not a lot, but it was a start. More importantly, she had a credit card. An idea, cold and calculated, began to form in my mind. Jamie Miller was a ghost, but Amelia Rosewood was a real person, with a real identity, a credit score, a digital footprint. The next morning, I threw away the clothes I'd escaped in. I couldn't risk being identified by them. I used Amelia's credit card to buy a bus ticket, a one-way ticket, as far away as I could get. Los Angeles. It was the city of reinvention, a place where people went to disappear and become someone new. It felt fitting. The days on the bus were a blur. I sat by the window watching America scroll by, feeling like a phantom. I barely spoke to anyone. I ate at bus station diners, ordering food with Amelia's voice, paying with her money. Each transaction was a small act of identity theft, and with each one, the guilt lessened and the sense of ownership grew. I spent hours on her phone, not just planning, but learning. I looked through her photos, trying to piece together the life I had stolen. There were pictures of her with friends at a beach, at a concert, pictures with a family, a smiling mother and father, a younger brother. Each photo was a stab of guilt. These were people who would be looking for her, worrying about her. I had to create a story. Using her social media, I began to carefully craft a new narrative. I posted a vague, happy photo of a sunset I took from the bus window. The caption, "Sometimes you just need to get away and find yourself." Taking a spontaneous trip to the West Coast to chase some dreams will be off the grid for a while. Love you all. It was a lie. A weak alibi. But it was something. It might buy me some time. It might make her family think she was being flighty and adventurous. Not that she was the victim of a consciousness-swapping madman. When the bus finally pulled into the sprawling, chaotic terminal in Los Angeles, I felt a surge of panic. I was alone, in a new city, in a new body, with a stolen identity and dwindling funds. But as I stepped off the bus and into the warm California sun, I felt something else, too. I felt a sense of possibility I hadn't felt since I was a teenager. I looked down at my hands, Amelia's hands, and for the first time, they didn't feel like a costume. They felt like mine. I found another cheap motel and began the second phase of my plan, becoming Amelia. I used her credit card to buy new clothes. Not flashy or expensive, but things that felt right for this new life. Simple jeans, soft sweaters, a few sundresses. Each new item of clothing felt like shedding another layer of Jamie. I bought makeup. I had no idea what to do with it. I sat in front of the motel mirror with a cheap starter kit, watching online tutorials on my phone. My first attempts were disastrous. I looked like a clown, but I kept at it, my hand growing steadier. I learned the delicate art of eyeliner, the way a little bit of mascara could make my eyes look bigger, the way blush could add a warm, healthy glow to my cheeks. It was like painting on a new face, a mask that was slowly becoming my own. I practiced walking in low heels, then higher ones, up and down the length of the motel room until the awkward wobble was replaced by a confident stride. I practiced modulating my new voice, learning to control its pitch and tone. I was erasing Jamie Miller, one brushstroke, one step, one word at a time. The man I had been was fading, becoming a distant, painful memory, and in his place, Amelia was solidifying, growing from a panicked imposter into a person with a plan. A person who was determined to live the life she had stolen, and to live it better than the one she had left behind. Los Angeles was a city of 1,000,000 lonely people, which made it the perfect place to hide. I found a small furnished studio apartment in a neighborhood that was just anonymous enough, and paid the first month's rent with the last of the cash I had. Amelia's credit cards were a lifeline, but I knew they were a ticking clock. Sooner or later, her family would report them stolen. I needed to become self-sufficient. But how? What skills did Amelia Rosewood have that I could use? I scrolled through her phone again, looking for clues. Her music app was filled with playlists of indie singers and classic rock. Her notes app had fragments of poetry, angsty, heartfelt verses about love and loss. She was creative, an artist. One evening, out of sheer boredom and loneliness, I was humming to myself, a half-remembered tune from one of her playlists. I stopped. The sound that had just come out of my mouth was beautiful. It was clear, perfectly pitched, with a natural, breathy vibrato. It wasn't just a pleasant voice, it was a singing voice, a truly exceptional one. Curiosity piqued. I tried singing for real. I pulled up the lyrics to a song on her phone and sang along softly. The notes flowed out of me effortlessly. Jamie Miller had been completely tone-deaf. I couldn't carry a tune in a bucket. But this body, this vocal structure, it was a finely tuned instrument. A crazy idea began to bubble up. It was the most audacious, reckless thought I'd had yet, but it felt right. There was a small, dusty guitar case in the corner of her closet in the pictures I'd seen of her old room. I'd seen it in the background. On a hunch, I went to a pawn shop and bought the cheapest acoustic guitar I could find. Back in my apartment, I held the instrument in my lap. It felt awkward, but my new, nimble fingers seemed to have a faint memory of their own. I looked up basic chords online. To my astonishment, my fingers found the positions almost naturally. It was a faint muscle memory, left behind by the body's true owner. Amelia knew how to play. I spent the next few weeks locked in that tiny apartment, teaching myself to be her. I practiced the guitar until my fingertips were raw. I sang until my throat was hoarse, and I started to write. I took the fragments of poetry from her phone and wove them into lyrics, adding my own 50 years of heartache, regret, and newfound wonder. The result was a strange fusion, the raw, youthful emotion of Amelia's words, filtered through the world-weary soul of Jamie. The songs were melancholic, beautiful, and deeply, painfully honest. When the money was almost gone, I knew it was time. I found a local coffee shop that had an open mic night. The thought of performing in front of people was terrifying. It was one thing to be Amelia in the anonymity of a crowd, but another entirely to be on a stage, under a spotlight, with every eye on me. What if they saw the fraud? What if they saw the scared old man hiding behind the pretty face? But desperation was a stronger force than fear. That night, I dressed carefully, a simple black dress, a pair of worn-in boots, just enough makeup to feel confident. I walked to the coffee shop, the guitar case heavy in my hand, my stomach a knot of icy dread. When they called my name, next up we have Amelia Rosewood. My knees almost buckled. I walked to the small makeshift stage, my hands trembling so hard I could barely plug in the guitar. I didn't look at the audience. I just focused on the microphone. I took a deep breath, and I sang. I sang about loss, about feeling like a stranger in your own skin. I sang about second chances and the terrifying beauty of starting over. I poured all the fear, all the guilt, all the secret, soaring hope of the past month into that one song. When the last chord faded, there was a moment of absolute silence. I thought I had failed. I thought they hated it. My eyes, which had been squeezed shut, slowly opened. The entire coffee shop was staring at me, their faces rapt. And then, one person started to clap, then another, and another. Within seconds, the small room was filled with applause. It was a wave of sound, of acceptance, that washed over me and broke through the wall of fear I had built around myself. They weren't looking at Jamie Miller. They weren't looking at a thief. They were looking at Amelia Rosewood, the singer, and they loved her. That was the beginning. I went back every week. I started getting offered small, paying gigs at local bars and clubs. People started to know my name. They were drawn to the voice, but also to the story in my songs. They said I had an old soul, that my lyrics had a depth that was surprising for someone so young. They had no idea how right they were. The fear of being discovered never entirely went away. Every time I saw a police car, my heart would leap into my throat. Every time someone asked about my family, I would give the vague, rehearsed story about chasing my dreams. The lies were a constant, low-level hum beneath the music. But the more I performed, the more I became Amelia. The stage was my sanctuary, under the warm glow of the lights, with a guitar in my hands and a microphone in front of me. I wasn't an imposter. I was an artist. I was real. The ghost of Jamie Miller was still there, but his voice was growing fainter every day, drowned out by the sound of applause and the siren song of my new life. 2 years passed, 2 years of smoky bars, cheap diners, and long nights writing songs in my small apartment. 2 years of slowly, meticulously building a life. Amelia Rosewood went from a whisper at open mic nights to a name people knew in the LA indie music scene. I signed with a small record label. I recorded an album. It was called Borrowed Skin. The critics called it haunting and profound. No one ever questioned the title. I lived in a better apartment now, one with a small balcony overlooking the city. I had friends, other musicians and artists who knew me only as Amelia, the quiet girl with the powerful voice and the sad eyes. We'd have drinks after shows, talk about music and life. They'd talk about their futures, their dreams of fame and fortune. I would just listen, a strange, secret smile on my lips. My dream had already come true, in the most impossible way imaginable. Sometimes, late at night, I would stand on my balcony and look out at the endless sea of city lights, and I would think about him, Jamie Miller. It felt like thinking about a character in a book I'd read a long time ago. A tragic character, a man beaten down by life, who made one desperate, insane choice in a sterile hospital room. I wondered what had happened to him, what had happened to my body. Did Amelia wake up in that broken, 50-year-old shell and scream? Did she try to tell them? Did they believe her, or did they sedate her, label her as delusional? A psychiatric case. Is she now living out her days in a mental institution? Trapped in the prison I escaped. The guilt was a cold, smooth stone that I carried in my heart. It was the price I paid for this life, for this body, for this voice. There were nights when it was heavy, when the weight of what I'd done threatened to crush me. I would look in the mirror and see the face of the girl whose life I had stolen, and I would hate myself. But then the sun would rise, and I would pick up my guitar. And when I sang, the guilt would recede. The music was my absolution. It was the only way I knew how to make sense of it all, how to honor the life I took by creating something beautiful with it. I had never tried to contact Amelia's family. It was too dangerous, too cruel for them. Their daughter was alive and well, if distant. I sent them anonymous cashier's checks every month, a significant portion of my earnings, a pathetic, silent apology for the daughter I had taken from them. One day, I was in a bookstore, browsing the shelves, when I saw a man who reminded me of myself, of my old self. He was in his mid-50s, with a tired slump to his shoulders, a face etched with the familiar lines of disappointment. He was buying a book on home repair. For a moment, our eyes met. He gave me a polite, dismissive glance, the kind an older man gives a young woman who is part of a world that no longer belongs to him. He saw Amelia. He had no idea he was looking at a ghost of himself. I left the bookstore, my heart pounding. In that brief, meaningless exchange, I saw the chasm between the two lives I had lived. I had crossed a bridge that could never be uncrossed. That night, I wrote my final song for the new album. It was a simple, quiet ballad. It wasn't about love or heartbreak. It was about a man who died in a car crash, whose weary soul was set free, and who was reborn in the last place he ever expected. It was a goodbye. I am Amelia Rosewood now, not just in name or in appearance. I am her in my heart, in my soul. The memories of Jamie Miller are like faded photographs from a stranger's family album. I feel a distant pity for him, for the sad, broken man he was. I am grateful to him for his final, desperate act of courage. He gave me this life. He gave me my life. I know what I did was wrong. It was a monstrous, selfish act born of despair. But as I stand on a stage, with the warm lights on my face and my voice filling the darkness, I feel a sense of peace that Jamie Miller never knew. He was a man drowning in the past. I am a woman singing for the future. Jamie Miller died in that car crash 2 years ago. The hospital just kept his body breathing for a little while longer. Only Amelia was left. And she will live. She will live a life that is vibrant and full and brilliant enough for the both of them.